Welcome to Family Cafe's School Team Session 4. Today's session focuses on Child Find, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, or IDEA, and Special Education Disability categories. So far, you've participated in Session 1, where you received the Family Cafe program overview. Session 2 was about understanding and communicating with families. And Session 3 focused on strategies to empower families. Today's session, Session 4, will focus on the legal requirements surrounding identifying children with disabilities. Upcoming sessions will cover special education evaluations, and then finally, the Individualized Education Program, or IEP. If you're taking this training with a group and a facilitator, let's take a moment to check in with each other to discuss your progress since the last session. You may refer to your planning notes from previous sessions to guide your thinking. Press pause now to check in with each other. If you are taking this training alone, please continue onward. Now that we've checked in, let's continue. Here is today's agenda for Session 4. Today's outcomes include, first, leaving with a better understanding of Child Find, what it is, and its purpose. We will discuss how this impacts highly mobile students. Second, we will review key legal concepts from the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, including free, appropriate public education and least restrictive environment. Finally, we will discuss the 13 disability categories. If you are working with a facilitator with today's training, you will conclude with a question and answer session and an evaluation. Before we get started, let's take a look at some relevant resources. The primary source we will use is the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act statute and its regulations. Other resources listed here include your Beyond the Bake Sale book, the Center for Appropriate Dispute Resolution in Special Education, known as CADRE, the Center for Parent Information and Resources, and additional resources such as high-quality IEPs, the IRIS Center, the Ohio Coalition for the Education of Children with Disabilities, and the Texas Education Agency. You can search for any of these online to learn more and go directly to the resources provided by each agency or organization. Now, let's begin with Child Find, which is a federal law that requires districts to look for, find, and evaluate children who may need special education. Before you can support students with disabilities at your school, children with disabilities first have to be identified. When it comes to Child Find, eligibility includes any child from birth through age 21. Child Find is a law that requires school districts to identify children with disabilities living in their school district. Child Find includes any child who may need special education and related services. This means that Child Find applies to children who may be more difficult to identify, including homeless children, wards of the state, or children who attend private school. Child Find is important because it is a law that ensures that no child slips through the cracks, even if there are obstacles. Districts have a duty to identify children with a disability. It is important for everyone to understand Child Find to ensure that children get identified. Therefore, Child Find policies and procedures are required to be widely shared through the district website, newspapers, leaflets, pamphlets, and other forms of communication. Child Find posters can be found in schools and district administrative offices. You may also see posters in places like doctor's offices, grocery stores, or service providers' offices. Often, the first person who suspects there may be a disability is the parents. For parents who suspect that their child may have a disability, The first step is to talk with school district personnel, such as the child's teacher, principal, special education coordinator, or special education director. Ideally, parents who suspect their child may have a disability that adversely affects the child's education will request an evaluation from the district. However, it is also important to understand that not all parents have the knowledge, resources, or trust to do this on their own. Sometimes teachers also suspect a disability before parents. As we discussed in previous trainings, there are increased barriers for highly mobile children because it can take a while for schools to acquire data to identify a suspected disability when children move frequently. Because Family Cafe focuses on highly mobile families as one of the specialized groups for which we are helping districts and campuses provide additional support, this training will also focus on child find from a highly mobile student perspective. There are a few things that districts should keep in mind when thinking about child find from the perspective of highly mobile families. First, the district should be aware when a highly mobile family moves into the district. Children who are highly mobile are at risk for being unidentified because they move frequently. So districts need to be aware of their status as highly mobile to make sure that they are receiving supports. Once a school understands that a child is highly mobile, it is also important for that to be communicated with teachers and relevant school staff to make sure adequate support is placed. Second, districts should communicate with highly mobile families who move into the district and explain child find policies. Often, good communication practices with families can help schools understand if there are academic concerns that the student has encountered at previous schools. It is particularly important for districts to obtain as much information as possible about the child's educational history. Conversations with families can help fill in the gaps from educational records. Finally, districts should make sure families can easily locate child find information on the district website. Families need to understand their rights and who to contact with concerns. These simple steps can help districts communicate child find with highly mobile families who may need this information. Child find requires districts to identify children with suspected disabilities to ensure that they have access to the supports and services that they need. Now, let's discuss the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, Free Appropriate Public Education, Least Restrictive Environment, and the 13 disability categories. IDEA stands for the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. It is a federal law that ensures any child with a disability receives a free, appropriate public education, or FAPE, in the least restrictive environment. The least restrictive environment is a legal requirement under IDEA that says students with disabilities must be educated in general education classrooms with non-disabled peers to the maximum extent appropriate. The least restrictive environment should always be specific to the child, depending on that child's needs. So the least restrictive environment is not always the general education classroom. That may be a good place to start, but the team must determine the least restrictive environment based on the supports the child needs to be successful in school. Schools identify children with disabilities through evaluation to determine if an individualized education program is needed. We will go into those specific processes and details in future training sessions. Children who are identified as students with disabilities must receive services that meet their unique needs and allow them to access a free, appropriate public education. Now, here is some additional information to help explain disabilities under IDEA. To qualify for special education services, IDEA requires that a child meet the criteria for one of the 13 disability categories outlined in the law. The child's disability must also affect their education or schooling. IDEA makes clear that in order for a child to be eligible for special education services, there must be an educational need. What does educational need mean? For example, a child who has a condition such as diabetes may qualify for special education under the other health impairment category if the diabetes affects education. For instance, if a student misses school because of low blood sugar, that may be something a committee reviews and determines does create an educational need. However, if a student with diabetes has the condition well managed with medication and school performance is not affected in any way, then there likely is not an educational need. Not every student who has diabetes will qualify, as it depends on educational need. Before we discuss the 13 categories, let's go over developmental delays. Developmental delays are defined in IDEA, but they are not actually considered one of the 13 disability categories. Developmental delays occur when a child does not meet expected developmental milestones in one or more areas. This can include physical development, cognitive development, language development, or social emotional development. Because developmental delays are not considered a formal disability category, under IDEA, states have discretion in how they address needs stemming from developmental delays. For states that recognize developmental delays, they generally apply to children ages 3 through 9. After age 9, children who have experienced developmental delays can typically qualify under a different disability category if the impact is still evident. Some states, and yours may be one of them, define developmental delay separately. Some include it within an existing IDEA category, while others add it as an additional category. If you are working with a facilitator right now, your facilitator may pause this video to discuss how this applies in your state. If you're taking this training alone, you can continue. Welcome back. Let's discuss the 13 disability categories as identified by IDEA, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. As we discuss these, please notice that some are very broad and others are more specific. Also keep in mind that language and terminology may vary from state to state. Together, these categories cover many different challenges children may experience. In order to be identified under one of the 13 disability categories, a child must first be evaluated in accordance with IDEA evaluation rules. Before we look at the details of these categories, let's review a great quote to frame our thinking. When you've met one student with a disability, you've met one student with a disability. This idea comes from a quote by Stephen M. Shore that originally applied specifically to autism. When you have met one individual with autism, you have met one individual with autism. This quote applies more broadly to all students with disabilities, because disabilities vary greatly, and their impact can look very different from one student to another. Let's start with the category of autism. Autism is a neurological and developmental condition. Students identified with autism are part of a broad spectrum, ranging from students with very low or even no support needs to students with significant support needs. Being autistic does not necessarily mean that the child needs an IEP because the impact of autism is very broad and varied, and it depends on whether or not there is an educational need. Individuals with autism may have challenges with social skills and communication, and they often display restrictive or repetitive behaviors or interests. At one time, autism was not its own category. Students who may now be identified with autism might previously have been identified under developmental delay or intellectual disability. In the past, the term mental retardation, which is no longer used, may also have been applied. But today, autism has its own category. Let's move to another category, deaf blindness. This category combines hearing and visual impairment, which together may create severe communication and other developmental or educational needs. A student's communication challenges in this category are affected not only by limited or no vision, but also by limited or no hearing. A separate category is deafness. Deafness is a hearing impairment so severe that a child has difficulty processing linguistic information through hearing, with or without amplification, such as hearing devices. Deafness also negatively affects a child's educational performance. This category includes a wide range of hearing related impairments. Next, we have emotional disturbance. Remember, these are the category labels under IDEA. States may use somewhat different terminology. In Texas, for example, emotional disturbance is referred to as an emotional disability. Emotional disturbance is a condition that shows one or more of the following characteristics over a long period of time. These may include an inability to learn that cannot be explained by intellectual, sensory, or health factors, inappropriate behaviors, or a general, ongoing mood of unhappiness or depression. That long period of time part is important. We are not talking about temporary moodiness or the normal ups and downs that everyone experiences. Emotional disturbance may also include physical symptoms, and it can include conditions such as schizophrenia, anxiety disorder, and bipolar disorder. This category covers mental health concerns. Our next category is hearing impairment. This is different from deafness. Hearing impairment refers to a hearing loss that may be permanent or fluctuating, and that adversely affects educational performance, but does not meet the criteria for deafness. Although this category includes a wide range of hearing-related impairments, it is distinct from the educational disability category of deafness. Next, we have intellectual disability. This refers to significantly sub-average intellectual functioning that exists at the same time as deficits in adaptive behavior, and that appears during the developmental period. The previous term used for this category was mental retardation. Another category is multiple disabilities. This refers to a combination of impairments, such as a speech disorder and a visual impairment. This category includes children with some of the most significant physical, cognitive, and communication-related impairments. Students in this category generally need extensive support across many skill areas. Next, we have orthopedic impairment. This is a severe impairment in one or more of three main areas. These may include neuromotor impairments, degenerative diseases, or musculoskeletal disorders that adversely affect a child's educational performance. Impairments caused by disease, such as bone tuberculosis, and impairments from other causes, such as cerebral palsy or amputation, may fit under orthopedic impairment. Next is other health impairment, often referred to as OHI. Students who qualify under the other health impairment category have limited strength, vitality, or alertness, including heightened alertness to environmental stimuli. Another health impairment results from chronic or acute health problems. The most common example is attention deficit disorder, with or without hyperactivity, but it can also include things like Tourette syndrome or a heart condition. Our previous example of diabetes would be covered under other health impairment. Next, we have specific learning disability. This is a disorder that affects a child's ability to acquire and use language, math, or reading skills, which can result in difficulties with reading, writing, and math. The difficulty may involve one, two, or all three of these areas. A specific learning disability is a disorder in one or more of the basic psychological processes involved in understanding or using language, whether spoken or written. It may show up as difficulty listening, thinking, speaking, reading, writing, spelling, or doing mathematical calculations. Specific learning disability is the most common disability category for students who have an individualized education program. One important fact is that students with a specific learning disability typically spend about 80% of their time in general education settings. Let's move on to speech or language impairment. This is a communication disorder that affects a student's ability to understand or express language. Students in this category may have difficulty with articulation, fluency, prosody, voice control, or language development. Next, we have traumatic brain injury. This is an acquired injury to the brain caused by an external physical force that results in total or partial functional disability or psychosocial impairment. A psychosocial impairment makes it difficult for a person to function effectively. Traumatic brain injury can affect one or more areas such as cognition, language, memory, attention, reasoning, abstract thinking, judgment, problem solving, sensory abilities, perception, motor abilities, psychosocial behavior, physical functioning, information processing, and speech. Next is visual impairment, including blindness. This category includes vision impairments that, even with corrections such as glasses, still adversely affect a child's educational performance. Now that we've gone through the 13 categories, remember, when you've met one student with a disability, whatever that disability may be, you have met one student with a disability. Today we covered Child Find, IDEA, and the 13 disability categories identified at the federal level. We hope that you have found this legal overview of key concepts pertaining to special education to be helpful. For deeper understanding, please explore the resources that we identified in this video and participate in question and answer opportunities. If you are working with a facilitator, please take time at the end of this video for questions and answers. It would be a good idea to discuss nuances that apply to your state with the 13 disability categories. Your facilitator can help clarify any information from today with specific questions that come up in your setting and within your state. Your team may also take time to check in about next steps with your Family CAFÉ action plan. Finally, your facilitator will ask you to complete an evaluation survey. This is very useful to us so that we can continuously improve, and we thank you in advance for taking the time to complete the evaluation. If you are taking this training alone, please feel free to reach out to the Family CAFÉ project team with any questions that come up. We are always happy to help, and we have drop-in office hours that can also bring deeper understanding to how these topics apply to different settings and circumstances. On behalf of the Family CAFÉ project team, thank you very much for joining us in Session 4.